So we're revisiting Romans chapter 7 again today because of a man who's been trying to question right and left no matter what is said. He refused to watch the video all the way through that I posted, and he came along and saw. That's the analysis of Romans 7. You can see it up here. I highly recommend it. I go verse by verse through Romans 7, the whole chapter, not just a few verses that they take out of context and misunderstand the literary devices being used, which is used by Paul in 1 Corinthians 13 and by John in 1 John 1. And we use it commonly in English. We use I as a type of person. We use you as a type of person. We use one as a type of person. One should do this. If one had this, they would do this. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. Does he mean only him? Is he limiting this only to him? Don't be an idiot. You know that he's not limiting it to only him here. So why would you think that in Romans he's limiting it only to him? And in fact, by the evidence of Romans 7, it isn't even him. It's about anyone else. Now look, this guy says, yeah, but it says though, or if I, though I. So it's not the same as Romans 7. Yes, it is. And there's no evidence here that he's not limiting it to himself. You already understand that implicitly because you recognize it as that literary device implicitly. You don't even need evidence for that to know that this is being used. I here is being used as anyone. Though anyone speak with tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, he has become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. That's what Paul means. But he's saying, I. Why? The Corinthians look up to Paul. Paul is an apostle. He's saying that anyone, even I, the one that you look up to the most, who's here among you on earth, preaching and teaching to you, even if I, then this happens. He's using himself as an example for anyone in this case. And it's understood. You understand that implicitly. Where's the evidence? If you read his argument that's going on here in his teaching, then you can build a case for him not exclusively talking about himself with this warning. Otherwise, if you have no evidence, no matter what you may feel inside, you got to take it literally. He means him and not me. He means him and not you. But then you're going to argue and say, no, but it's obvious. Obvious how? Show me the evidence. If you think this is obvious, then why don't you think Romans 7 is obvious? Because you want to continue in your sin. You want that doctrine that says that as long as you're in the body, you cannot help but sin. And yet everywhere we turn in the Bible, God rebukes you and says you're going to hell if you don't stop. And yet you still want to ignore what is obvious, as you say. Romans 7 is the most irrefutable evidence that Paul is using that this device is being used. 1 Corinthians 13 is the least amount of evidence. There's none. You have to glean it from the context, the much broader context of his argument and teaching, to prove that this is that literary device. And yet you feel it when you read it. But Romans 7 has absolutely concrete, irrefutable evidence. Bam, bam, bam. Before and after. And yet you reject it, you ignore it, you wipe it out as if it doesn't exist in the testimony of God. It is the most surest that he's using that literary device. And 1 John 1 is in between. It's there, the proof is solid, but not nearly as solid as Romans 7, and yet it's there. And there's no doubt that John is using that when he says we. If we walk in the darkness, if we walk in the light, he's not talking about himself walking in darkness. He's not walking in darkness. He's the Apostle John. He's walking in light. You err against God. Now let's turn to Romans 7. Look with me at verse 5 of Romans 7. Now I know it's not in the passage that you like to use to support you in your sin. Exactly. This is what Paul says before those verses start. For when we were in the flesh, meaning we're not now, the sinful passions which were aroused by the law, not now. Those sinful passions are not now aroused by the law. That's what were means. For when we were in the flesh, the sinful passions which were aroused by the law were at work in our members to bear fruit to death. Were at work in our members, are not now. Let's see you make the argument then that those verses that you love to apply as if it were the normal Christian experience are Paul's experience when writing this. He says were. Not are. Were. Past. Meaning not now. Now he tells what's going on now. But now we have been delivered from the law. We've been delivered from the law, arousing that passion in our members, having died to what we were held by, so that we should serve in the newness of the Spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. Now we know what was arousing the members through the passion, which was to serve through the oldness of the letter of the law. Looking at the letter of the law, line by line, and trying to do each one thing that you see, instead of trying to do what is right. Because without the Spirit, you don't know what's right. Verse 21. I find then a law that evil is present with me, the one who wills to do good, for I delight in the law of God according to the inward man. But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin which is in my members. Are you captive to law? Or are you freed from law? Are you under law or are you under grace? For you, the same ones who declare that you cannot help but sin as long as you're in the flesh, also declare that you're not under law, but under grace. And so you lie. You lie. You might not even know that you're lying, but now you know you're lying. Paul calls that a law of sin and death. And if you are no longer under law, you're no longer under the law of sin and death more than anything. But you testify the truth that you are indeed under the law of sin and death. Therefore, you've never known Jesus, and you are not rescued from sin and death by the cross of Christ. You're not. You're not rescued. Paul said, were for the normal Christian experience. But for the one who is a wretched man, who does not know who will save him from that body of death, though he knows what the law says, which is good and just and holy, he's lost. He's not saved by Christ. He's not rescued by Christ at all. He's lost. He's not a believer in Jesus. He doesn't know Jesus. He's not been set free by the Son. And therefore he is indeed not free. May the Lord bless you as you seek him with all your heart.